Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're glad to have you join us for our last webinar of the session for the Campus Best Practices series that we have for the Transformation Fund. We would like to welcome SUNY Cortland talking about proactive advising. We're super happy and excited to have them join us today. We have Kathleen Burke, a distinguished teaching professor of economics. Mary Schlarb, Assistant Vice Provost for Student Achievement, Abby Thomas, Director of Advisement and Transition, and Carol Vandekar, Vice Provost. So I'm going to let them take it away, and please go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Jen, and thank you for having us here today. So as Jen mentioned, I'm Abby Thomas, Director of Advisement and Transition, and you'll hear from my colleagues as we kind of move forward with our presentation. We're excited to be here today to share with you some of the things that we've been doing with our proactive advising model and our advising initiatives, and are really appreciative of SUNY for the transformation funds that have enabled us to do this project and to move forward with some advising initiatives on campus. So what we plan to do today during our time together is give you a little bit of a background of our need and what we identified as what we thought might be impactful in engaging advisors. Talk a little bit about our guiding principles around that, the structure and activities that we developed, and the feedback that we've received so far, and the next steps we anticipate taking and considering as we move forward. So to get us started, I wanted to share a little bit about the SUNY Cortland advising model. We are a faculty-based advising model, so all students are assigned an individual advisor in their major. Ooh, our slides are jumping all around.
I was like,
sorry. So students are required to meet with their advisor each semester, regardless of their year, prior to registering. So we do really have a proactive approach to our advising, making sure that students are meeting with somebody at least once a semester prior to registering. As I mentioned, I'm the director of our Advisement and Transition Office, and so our office provides support and resources to faculty advisors as well as students regarding advising. So we specifically advise our pre-major or undecided students, support walk-in advising. So any student who has a question about any advising thinking about changing their major, we see students on a walk-in basis. We do specific outreach addressing institutional gaps in achievement. We are a Starfish campus, so we utilize Starfish as well as the college student inventory to identify places where we might see some gaps for students and how we might be able to outreach to them, support them, and really try and share that information with academic advisors. So advisors are getting a full picture of their students while they're meeting with them. We provide professional development for our advisors. We have a campus-wide advising committee, which Kathy is a member of. We send out weekly Wiser Advisor tips and sharing timely academic advising information to our campus so that folks are aware of things that are coming up related to advising. We host workshops for advisors, as well as provide individual advising meetings with new faculty, with faculty and departments, and really try and engage faculty with advising. But we identified a need to do more. We really were wanting to address some of our gaps in student persistence, really wanting to look at how to improve equity in academic achievement and how advising could help with that. So we started noticing some trends in perceptions of advising through our NESI, FESI, campus-wide advising survey, where we were seeing a slow trend of dissatisfaction from students around advising. And so we really wanted to start to get an understanding of what was the advisor experience with this? Where was this coming from? What were advisors experiencing with students? Where was this dissatisfaction coming from? And how could we increase faculty involvement in professional development. While we offered a lot of workshops for advisors, they weren't necessarily taking advantage of it. So what could we do to create a more integrated culture of advising on campus? So when we had the opportunity for this grant, we were able to identify some goals and things that we wanted to accomplish. So we wanted to explore the advising relationship and really spend some time understanding why it matters in student success. Expand our understanding of the experiences our students are having across different populations, build upon the skills and strategies that we have available to students, but how do we get that to advisors and help support them advising their students? Develop advising strategies through case studies. We have lots of great examples of ways to engage with students and support students holistically. How could we get that information out to faculty? Give them an opportunity to reflect on their experience as advisors. What does it mean to have advisor self-care and to take care of themselves through the process? And provide an opportunity for fun and renewal and connection across campus. How do we help build relationships across campus, across departments, across schools, and give folks an opportunity to connect with others that they might not normally interact with?
Great. Thank you, Abby. I'll take over. I'm Mary Schlarb. And once we had those goals in mind, we started to think about how to design this workshop to achieve those goals. And we had a great opportunity through this SUNY Transformations grant to work together with faculty to design the workshop, like Kathleen Burke. And we also could offer a $500 stipend to the faculty, which especially initially really motivated participation, I'll have to say. And so again, thanks to the Transformations grants, we could provide this. We had a really great response of between 12 and 22 participants per session so far. So far we've done 3 sessions and we've had about 50 faculty engaged in this project. We set it at a day and a half, really to be respectful of our faculty members' time. The feedback we're getting, however, is that they think we should make it longer, which is always good feedback. They want more. So that's great. Through the grant, we are offering 10 labs through the end of 2026 academic year. And we've been able to involve, like I said, these wonderful faculty facilitators like Kathleen in both the design and the facilitation of the workshop. We set ground rules at the beginning to really create this environment. We really were trying to create a laboratory experience where people could experiment, investigate, ask questions, and make errors. And so create this kind of safe, this brave space where people can make suggestions without fear of people sharing the information. We kept it confidential, and we really wanted it to be a place where people could ask those questions and share their ideas. For recruitment, we just sent an invitation out to our whole faculty list and really invited faculty who have some kind of an advising load, and really got a great response initially. And now as we offer more, we're asking our deans, our chairs, and our alumni from the labs that we've offered so far to help recruit. And again, we're offering 3 more sessions and 50 more people have signed up. So we're really excited. The word is spreading about how this is worth the time. Even with the stipend, that's great. But I think even some people want to participate again. And so we also looked logistically, we looked for a space that allows for engagement. We had a space where we could be in one big group, but also we could break into smaller groups and work on case studies and other activities. So when we sat down and started to design this, we thought, okay, are we going to just put together all of the different workshops on the different tools, Starfish and DegreeWorks and the curriculum and catalog and how to use this? Or are we going to do this a little differently? And so we decided to do it a little differently because Abby's office is already offering individual workshops on those tools. So we took a more expansive view of student success theory and integrated that into our workshop. And for example, we used Laura Rendon's Cinta Passanti pedagogy, and I'll talk about that in another slide. We infused universal design into the design of the workshop, really choosing a selection of formats for our presentations and activities that really would help learners of different types, learners with different levels of experience, and faculty from across different programs. We infused a lot of sharing of data into the workshop. We really wanted to look at the student experience as the data shows it to help frame advisors' experiences and their understanding of who our students are. So we looked at NESI and FESI and, as Abby said, the advising survey, and integrated that and looked for some of the trends and also some of the institutional gaps in achievement. We focused on cultural humility and communication. I'll be talking about that in a slide or two. We created a rubric for a case study design, which we'll also talk about. And we required all the participants to do a self-assessment survey before they participated. That way, it gave them a chance to reflect on their advising and some of the strengths and some of the areas where they'd like to improve or the knowledge areas they'd like to learn. And that helped us design the workshop and what to focus on. And we infused diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the discussion. I think I've been to workshops where that's part of the discussion and maybe its own separate section of a workshop, but we really introduced it early on and infused consideration of how to empower our students and how to address, some of the issues that students face across different groups. So we were looking both at the diversity of the students as well as across campus programs. So this was our lab agenda and what it looked like by the end. I talked about some of these. So we integrated all of the things we talked about. We really culminated with these case studies, and Carol will be talking about those. We talked about the culture of advising on campus. And as we were going through this, a lot of people had different ideas they wanted to share. So we created a parking lot space. This was flip chart paper that we put up, and we asked people to share their ideas and strategies for effective advising, as well as ways in which the campus or peers could help support advising or advisors on campus. Okay. Cultural humility in advising. So now we're going to talk about a few examples of how we presented these topics. And one topic we talked about was cultural humility in advising. Cultural humility was a concept that really came out of the field of healthcare in the late 90s, where medical professionals, particularly in the nursing profession, and scholars looked at how can medical professionals work with patients and learn more about their cultural backgrounds and effective ways to communicate with patients, diagnose and treat them. And so that concept has expanded into education over the years. And so we were looking at it in terms of advising. And these are the circles here are showing different areas, different elements of cultural humility. And so from the perspective of an advisor, we would want an advisor to self-reflect on their biases and how their own experiences shape how they interact with their students, respect for the student's cultural background, a true, authentic curiosity and openness about the students' lives, and really asking open-ended questions to try to learn more about them and what interests them and what their challenges are. Of course, having empathy, really valuing lifelong learning, including our own learning as advisors and learning about our students, but also knowing when we are not the expert, especially about the student's background. They're the experts on their own their background and their challenges and how they have overcome them. And so we really looked at Laura Rendon's asset-based advising model. So not looking at the deficit, what the student is missing, but what strengths they have and leveraging their experiences and those strengths. and how their challenges have shaped them. So as an activity, we had some really good discussions about how they would create and enact Rendon's more spacious view of advising. How do we look at the whole student, at all of their intellectual needs, their personal interests, their emotional needs? And so we had some really good discussions around that, and we've taken notes, and we're going to share some of the ideas back with the faculty advisors. So now I'm going to pass it over to Carol, who will talk about another activity.
So one thing we were trying to do when we talked about inclusion was to not only infuse it across all the conversations, but also start to talk about the different dimensions that, you know, while we have understandings and research on different student characteristics, we know that every student coming in that sits down with an advisor is going to have a very unique experience. They'll have different lived experiences, preparedness. So we came up as kind of a joke. We started with, because we had this laboratory theme, why don't we do a periodic chart of student characteristics? And we actually then said, wait a minute, there are categories that you can put together. And so this is with apologies to any chemists who are out there, because it's a big oversimplification. But if you look, you'll see that there are things like different incoming demographic characteristics, educational background and preparedness, how the student engages once they come to campus, not only within the academic realm, but their whole campus experience overall. The ability and skills that they come in with, but what do they develop over time? Their goal clarity and how do they see career integrated with their academic goals and their well-being. So we kind of started to say every student, and you know, let's think about first-year students, like a traditional first-year student. That's a big part of our population. And we wanted folks to think about when that student comes in to talk to you, they each have their individual formula. And there are different things that happen in their life that affect them in different ways. But how we started to think about it was to ask each faculty member to think about their first semester at college. What were characteristics that were inhibiting to their experience, and what were characteristics that were positive and helped them be successful? And so we gave them time with this chart, and they really start to tell a story about their own experience. But it also then helps them, and this is a little bit of adult learning theory, it helps them to kind of go back to that place where we were as students. It takes us back to say, wait a minute, these are not folks with PhDs who have studied one topic for 20 years. These are folks that are really at the start of their collegiate experience and then at an early point in their life experiences. So let's get back to where we were when we were that person. And so if you go to the next slide, Mary. So then we asked them to actually do a scale and write out what are some of the pieces. And you'll see if you populate, I think if you hit the bar again, you'll see kind of what this might look like. Might be the graphics aren't coming up, but there are things that contributed. So I know one thing, when I picked my college, I did not realize it was a predominantly white institution, but being someone who's white, there were benefits for me to being in a privileged class around that. I had a strong support network in terms of approaching and pretty good understanding and a pretty good level of social engagement. If you look at some of the inhibiting factors, you know, what I realized was the school had gone co-ed only 10 years before. So my gender, as I went along, all of a sudden became more and more of an issue because you started to see some really strong structural differences in experiences for the men and women on campus. My intellectual curiosity was high. My academic preparedness might not have been as high. So we asked each person to lay this out, and then they share with the group as a way of kind of an icebreaker, but also as a way, it's very interesting because everyone, even though we're all working on this college campus, had very, very different experiences. So this is just one way for us to capture some of the research on students and their backgrounds. And right before we do this, we present on student development theory and student retention theory. And so this is a way to put it a little bit more in their own perspective so they can relate to it. Another piece that we really wanted to build in was to talk about how advising is viewed on our campus. and how advisors think it is valued. So we decided to use a cultural organizational model and kind of like a cultural audit exercise. We know that there are things advisors need help with, and we know there are suggestions they have. We also know they have opinions about how advising is valued or not valued on campus. So we had this exercise, which is archaeological team comes to campus. If they were to look around, what would the cultural symbols of advising be? Are there rituals, stories, language, symbols that we see? So for example, registration is a big ritual on our campus. You're required to see your advisor. There's a pin to be able to, the advisor gives you to register. There's a whole part of pieces that go together. If you do this exercise and you have more time, you can start to look at things like sagas, like what are the stories that we build up and tell over time? Heroes and villains, around a certain topic. But the bigger piece is that second question then. What do those symbols tell us about how we value advising on our campus? Are there clear indicators of the value? Are there points of divergence or points of convergence that we can address or build on? This we weren't, we just thought this would be a nice, different way to get constructive feedback. This has actually turned into a really open, honest dialogue, and we're able to take that feedback and have already started sharing that with some of the leaders on campus. The second day is really dedicated to our case studies. So we try to mix up the way in which we're working. But one of the things we did with, and I know all of us have written case studies in different ways, we very purposely said, okay, we're going to start with a rubric of what we want covered. So if you go back to that kind of periodic table of student experience and dispositions, we wanted to build in those things that we know are really important. We wanted to address some of those structural issues that make it challenging for certain students. And then there were academic topics we wanted to cover. There were different student engagement that we wanted to cover, or high impact practices. So the rubric actually helped us start, because we didn't start with just telling a story about a student. We were much more purposeful about that. The other thing we did was take real life cases, and Abby has a ton of them by leading the advising center, but take those cases and put in and build in a real authenticity to the case studies as well. We assign the groups purposefully. So we have 3 schools. We wanted people across the different schools to interact, but we also wanted folks with different levels of engagement. We know that we have folks who've advised for 25 years here coming to the workshop. They have a great perspective, and the networking that can happen during these kind of case study evaluations, I think is fantastic. And we wanted to pull out of that knowledge that everyone has during the case studies. Every case study as part of the processing was actually, what did you think about some issues of inclusion, diversion, and equity? How is it playing out here? How would it be different for different students? And not just think about, again, those student characteristics, but really shifting the emphasis onto the institution and what are some structural issues? What are processes? What are things that are happening that may be contributing to students' challenges? And so we start with one shorter case study, kind of a warm-up case study, and then we go into a larger case study, and they actually present, each group for the larger case study comes up to the front and they walk the group through that case study. We give them a template for that. And Kathy, I think you're up.
No, I was on the other pages, but I can do this one.
Okay, sorry.
I was on
My bad.
I thought Abby was doing these slides. So anyway, so we had we have feedback from all of the participants, and the beginning workshops, we understand, are actually attended mainly by the choir of those who take advising seriously and wanted to become part of this. So we were able to learn a lot of things about what's working and what can be improved with advising. Some of the feedback that we did receive through the surveys, like we had our conversations during the workshops, but we also had pre and post surveys that they completed. And this information here is coming from those surveys. 100% believed that it reinforced or expanded their knowledge on the policies, our understanding of students, and the understanding the student tools, and also how to apply the knowledge. And 70% said it expanded the knowledge across all of the areas that we covered within the workshop itself. And 54% are actually want to be facilitating the workshop, so doing what I do within it. So more than half of them said yes, they would also want to facilitate, which is wonderful that we can share those. We can share the load. We also had a lot of comments from them within the survey part of it. Much of it is due to their role within their department, right? I'm pretty fluent in advising due to my department size and my role as an advising coordinator, but they learned so much about how other people view advising within this, right? We were able to share across. And that was one of the most interesting parts, at least from my point of view, is seeing the diversity of how people can go about advising, particularly upon the size of departments, which we'll discuss again. We have some departments where an advisor can take their advisees out for coffee and discuss what's going on. And then there's others who have kind of an assembly line because you have so many advisees that you have to get through different things, and they have to come prepared with a laundry list of things before they can meet with their advisor. So there's a diversity of ways that they're going through that. The one comment that I loved, and I'll read that one out, I believe the workshop should be mandatory for new faculty members so that we can develop this culture of advising and know how important it is to our student success. So other things that we've learned about advising, we gathered a lot of the feedback, but there's 4 other areas that we would like to share with you today. The first is workload, right? We know that quality advising is hard, right? And it's become increasingly more difficult for our larger departments. We've heard the differences across departments in expectations, both for the advisor as well as our advisees. And those discussions led into there's hidden work underneath advisement, and which occurs when advisors don't meet those expectations, and then students seek out advisors who do provide guidance. So there's others who are advising many more students than their assigned workload. This prompted discussions about how we assess advising across campus. There are departments that currently do assess advising every semester, while others don't have a structural form for assessment. And we discussed making that campus-wide and a campus-wide assessment process so that we can use that assessment data to help market the importance of advising and having quality advising to promote its impact on student success. From the faculty discussions and the specific workshop activities, we're also able to gain insights into the current policies and procedures, as Carol had indicated. Some of our forms have changed as we've tried to make processing those forms more efficient, but with any change comes those unintended issues, and we've passed along much of that feedback to the relevant offices to make sure we refine those processes and get informed when our students do drop classes. Financial aid also has many implications, right? We could run an entire workshop and Abby actually does run a workshop on just financial aid. Because every student has their own unique financial aid package. So there is no one size fits all advising solution. It is a case-by-case basis of understanding how your advising is going to impact a student, and based off of their financial package, how you need to plan for them. So it is specialized for each student. Finally, based on the feedback from participants, we're trying to create a community of practice around advising on our campus. We've created a community in Teams for the participants of the advising lab, and here faculty can share their tools and their best practices, and we've included all the materials from the workshop. So basically, we're creating a repository for all the lab alumni to reference and use any of these things to enhance their advising. As Carol said, the alumni are actually promoting the workshop and recruiting new participants for us. And finally, based off of their experience in the laboratory, the participants have asked for specialized advising labs for new faculty as well as one that's just dedicated to graduate faculty based on their experience.
So thank you for that summary, Kathy. And Kathy's highlighted some of the things that we are looking forward to in terms of moving forward. As we reflect on the labs that we've already done and move forward with some of the ones that we're planning in the next several months, we're continuing to refine our activities. After each workshop, we're meeting as a group, identifying places where we can rework things. Was this the most effective activity? Do we want to put this here instead of there? And really taking the feedback from the participants to make each one better. So by the time we're done with all of the 10 that we're doing, it's going to be a masterpiece, because we keep just tweaking and shifting things around. And it's nice that we're able to do that and really look at ways to refine the activities that we're doing. And as Kathy mentioned, we're creating a version for newer faculty and are excited to be able to offer that in August before the start of the semester to help get things started for our new faculty, as well as our graduate advisors. And I think one thing that these labs have provided to us is really highlighted the difference between undergraduate and graduate advising and the types of resources that we should be developing for graduate advisors specifically, especially as we look at many of our graduate programs being online. So how do we support online learners and online advising in a way that we haven't really spent a lot of time on before? We also recognize that it's going to get harder to recruit people to attend these. So really trying to figure out, in addition to our lab alum, kind of talking it up, working with our deans, trying to get additional folks to participate. It's going to be the faculty who we really want there, that it's going to be hard to get there. And so really looking at how do we continue that recruitment and reach as many people as we can, and help provide faculty with opportunities to use this as part of their professional development for tenure and promotion, continuing appointment. So how they are utilizing this professional development opportunity to assist them in the things that are important and meaningful to them. And as Kathleen mentioned, our community of practice, and we've really had some great response to that, and faculty inputting their resources into our team. So people have been really collaborative in what we've been doing and have been like, oh yeah, I use this resource, let me upload it to the team. So it's not just filled with resources that we've put in there and developed through the lab, but what are real world things that our advisors are using with their students that they're willing to share and be a part of our community of practice. And so we look forward to growing that as well. So I see there's some questions that have popped up in the chat. And so we're going to move to questions. Our contact information is on this slide as well. So feel free to contact any of us if you have specific questions, but I want to open it up to comments, questions.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Been trying to answer as we go.
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, folks want to raise their hand, so you can come off mute and we can have a discussion. Since we have a little bit of time, that would be great. If you raise your hand, that would just be easier for us to keep track of who wants to speak.
Sure. We one of the early questions was how soon do faculty advisors meet with new students? Advisement and Transition coordinates summer orientation, which happens during the summer before. Hopefully most students attend during the summer. They have an individual faculty advising meeting. So they might not meet with the advisor they're assigned to, but we, of course, we would encourage, particularly for new transfer or first year students, for the faculty to have a meeting with them before registration, but there is mandatory advising for the students need to go meet with their advisor, discuss their plans before they're allowed to register. So probably a couple weeks into the semester, depending on the outreach and depending on the advisor, it hopefully will be earlier than that as well.
We also have a mandatory first-year experience course that all first-year students take, Core 101. And sometimes we have the faculty teaching that course also assigned as the advisor for that course. Doesn't always happen. We see it as a best practice, and we try and help facilitate that as best we can. So sometimes those students are meeting with their advisor on day one.
I think there's another question about how the notable positive reactions to the workshop. I think that varies. I'll, defer to my other folks because at different points, different ones of us are facilitating. And so I get to present on data and retention theory. I don't know if I'm the favorite, but I think people appreciate that we use quite a few different modalities. So the energy level is actually pretty high throughout. We also do quite a bit of collaborative active learning throughout. I do think the case studies, people are really by the second day ready for something like that and ready to get into it. And so I would probably say the case studies, but it is kind of the overall experience that we get the feedback on as well.
Yeah, and I meant to mention that Kathy and Abby created sort of quizzes that people could work on together to look at some of the tools and policies and procedures. And I think our more competitive folks in particular seem to get some energy out of that, energy out of that. So we made it fun, as Abby said earlier. We also provided lunch, which people appreciated, and snacks, to fuel people.
And stickers. People really enjoy stickers.
There's a question about a quick example of a case study. We're seeing if we have one pulled up. Do you have one?
Abby, you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a second to pull it together in my head. We tried to give the groups information to kind of build upon, right? So we didn't give them information at once because we know that students kind of share more information. So had an example of a student who had some alerts in starfish that they might not be doing so well. So kind of recognizing the benefit of faculty looking at starfish to gather some information on their students. This student was not doing well academically and was struggling financially and thought they wanted to join ROTC to help pay for things for college and to get a better financial footing. They were also a student athlete. So, when Carol talked about the rubric we created, this student kind of hit lots of things. They were not attending or coming to advising meetings regularly, was an undecided student trying to decide on a major. And so, kind of looking at how would you respond to that student? How would you support them in navigating accessing some financial resources, helping them understand and connect with resources to support them academically, and was joining ROT something that was going to help them? If they're also a student athlete, what does their time look like? How does that all balance out? What are some of the different things that the faculty should be thinking about when meeting with this type of student? So what are the resources they would connect them to? What are the questions they would be asking this student to help support the student and gather as much information as they could?
And it also speaks quite a bit to referral, like who are the appropriate offices and people that you bring in. I think I look at my colleagues now, but I'm knowing these folks for as long as we can share those case studies too. So we can either, Jen, if if there are materials, we'll share the whole thing. You can take whatever you like and adapt it to your campus, and we certainly would be happy to see what other people use too, because we're probably, the case studies are new to each person who comes through. I will say we're starting to get a little tired of our buddies in the case studies, but Yeah, but we're happy to share that if people would find it helpful.
Jack asked a question, with the big challenge being understanding the places, both physical and mental, from which our students come to us. Is there a resource showing generalizations about what challenges students from particular areas and backgrounds face?
Yeah, we actually have a following that activity where you think about yourself as a student. We go into a pretty good dive on what we know about our students, particularly focusing on those institutional gaps or where we see performance issues, not only just overall what's happening, but basic demographics of our students, you know, from things like how many come in as pre-majors and switch into something, the retention, the completion rates. You know, every time we do more, we're trying to do more with our gateway courses. So we'd want to come back and add that in as well. So that's a pretty good dive into what we have learned using the NESI, the student opinion survey that SUNY has, the Ruffalo Noel Levitt CSI, and just our institutional research, the data that we have as well. Almost like a micro data retreat as part of this. I have to say one thing, just in listening to my friends, that there's also a norming that is happening during these conversations, because I don't know what so advising is part of all the faculty's job. But because of different enrollments, we have some very different advising loads across the board. Some of our departments that teach more service and have fewer majors don't have as many advisees. And that's been a real big piece for us. And for folks to talk about, well, I think 25 is a big advising load. And then we'll have someone who is like, yeah, I have 2 or 3 times as many, because we just have some departments that are flagship, very big departments. Kathy comes from one of those departments. But the norming, not only about just what the workload looks like, but what are the expectations? Because I think advising could be one of those things that really sucks the life out of someone. If you don't have those set expectations of what the student's role is and what your role is and how much really is appropriate for you to get into something before you refer it out, or before you ask Abby's office, her number comes up all the time. You know, before you go and get that help, don't overextend yourself, and try and think of the ways that you can do it efficiently so you can spend more time on the more meaningful conversations and less time sometimes on some of the rote mechanics. Even though they're really important, we all get frustrated when we're just stuck in kind of a loop of, oh, the student is having trouble building a schedule. So, but that norming of kind of how do you set expectations, and what do you tell a student who emails you at 2 a.m? And you know, all those little conversations are really great, because people find the commonalities and then they find some of the differences in their advising approaches.
And I'll add that one of the resources we provided was a referral guide. We reached out to a lot of the student support offices across the campus and asked the directors of those offices, what do you do? Why would a student come to see you? You know, under what advice would you give to an advisor who is working with the student and might need their services of their office? So that was part of the binder that we gave. We gave this binder. Nice.
Yeah.
And it's really all the directors responded, and they provided really good information. So on our website, of course, you can find that information, just what the services are that they provide, but really to have that directed towards advisors, that information. You're an advisor, you know, why would you send a student to us? And that can also maybe alleviate some of the pressure on the advisor, so they don't have to try to solve the mental health crisis, or maybe they need tutoring, or yes, go to Abby's office is a good resource too. So
speaking from the advising perspective, having that binder during advisement, it's easier to look it up, right? And then trying to reach out in the moment, right? We can look together with the student and say, okay, this is what they're saying. Here's your situation. Okay, it does seem like it fits into this role. Let's reach out to them, but then also let's look here. We could also go this route. right? So that you're incorporating your student in that discussion and trying to figure out where the best place is and where should they start and what the backup plan would be. If we don't get it here, this is where we're going to go. So I know I have my binder due when I'm going through all of my advisees. And the CARP.
The CARP is the Cortland Advising.
Advisor resource packet, which we get in color if you're actually a participant. It has absolutely everything that you need as an advisor as a reference tool. So quick and dirty references to everything, which is wonderful.
Any other questions or comments? This has been a great discussion, but I don't want to cut anybody off. Great. Thank you so much, Mary, Abby, Carol, Kathleen. This was a great session. Kudos to you for this program that you've built, and thank you for sharing all of that. If you are interested in any other information, their contact information is on the slides, which will go out with the recording in a few days. So thank you again for attending, and have a great rest of your semester.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Jennifer.